Hi, good afternoon. Welcome, Karthik. Dr.
Good
Karthik.
afternoon.
So, on behalf of Sneha, I welcome you to this session, to this webinar, and for everyone, for the information of everyone, Dr. Karthik is a certified sensory integration therapist. He is also certified in handwriting without tears, and he is certified in aquatic therapy and also trained in Bobath and NDT concept. So he hails from Chennai, and I've known him for quite a few years, and he is together with us on the advanced sensory integration workshop which we have been holding for the therapists. So without much ado, I request Dr. Karthik to start this webinar. Look forward to a complete webinar, which a workshop sort of a thing.
Um, Thank you. Thank you very much. So, shall I start?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. So, very good afternoon to all of you. And so, let me share my screen and switch off my video. So, during the webinar, if I am not audible or if you're not able to see my screen, please stop me immediately, as I don't have any other option to know whether you're able to see it or not. And yeah. So before we start, I would request all of you to open this link on your as a separate tab on your phone or on your laptop, whichever we are using. Keep it as a separate tab so that we can use it for our live polls during the presentation. I'll just give you a minute to do that so that we
Sir, we have already
maximum participation.
requested people to open it. We have already requested everyone to open it.
Yes, but there might be last minute.
Yeah, there are a lot of people joining last minute me Karya. Can you resend it?
Yeah.
Are you sending it in the chat box?
Yeah, sir. So that they can directly click it.
Yes, please do that. So I'll wait for a minute just to make sure that everyone joins
Sure,
in.
sure, sir.
Is it visible in the chat box?
Yes.
So while we wait for it, so I'm very happy to be involved in this webinar. First of all, thank you, Snehal ma'am, for inviting me, and thanks Purvi for taking all the measures, and your team as well. So we have been, I've been to Mumbai and we've done two workshops on sensory integration, and it's always a nice place for me to be in, and I really enjoy the practical sessions that we have with kids. Because every time I visit Mumbai, I see the children, I somehow feel good about myself. And so it's always nice. I mean, Dr. Snehal Deshpande makes you feel that. She makes you feel wanted, makes the warmth and the affection that she shows, and the guidance that she always is there. So everything, I think, works together when it comes to a workshop. So I'm very happy to be involved in this program, and I hope participants here as well, you will be finding it useful. And so please feel free to stop me, or feel free to give me a feedback how it was at the end of the session. And by the end, we'll also have a Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can put it down in the chat box, or at the end, if it is too long, too lengthy to put it in the chat box, you can ask me as well. Okay, so let's begin the session.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so before we start with, I would like to know who you are. So just please open that poll and let me know who you are. I hope all of you are able to see my screen.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so yes. Okay. I think we have a good mix of therapists here. Okay, so let's move on. The objectives for this particular webinar here is to know why we have to spend time on handwriting, why is it so important, and to appreciate the difference between the world of alphabets and the child's real world, because we always assume that they are same, which is not the case. And then to know the prerequisites for learning handwriting, because handwriting can be talked as the tip of the iceberg, okay? Because many times you see only that as a bigger problem, and when you try to understand it more and more, you understand that the child has some other issues which is actually culminating in a poor handwriting. So handwriting can be just a symptom where there could be other things hidden underneath. And then we learn about pre-writing skills. So we make sure that we are able to prepare the child for writing, and to understand about functional pencil grasp, how we should hold the pencil, and to identify when the child needs professional help. Okay, because many times we can work with the child and on our own. I mean, the teacher or the parent can teach, and then there are times when the conventional method doesn't help. Then you need a professional help, and to know about common mistakes while teaching handwriting and avoid them. Okay, so let's move on. So why do we spend time on handwriting? Because the more cognitive energy spent and attention spent on the mechanical part of the writing, the less attention is on the content of the writing. So you will find that the more I'm trying to focus that where should I start and how should I write, then I start focusing on the alphabet, but I actually forget what I'm writing. Why am I writing? Because if I ask you to write something, you will write it just like that. You don't even think about where should you start, where should you end. So which means you're focusing on the content of what you're writing. But children who are not able to get that, they are focusing more on the mechanical aspect. So what is happening? They're not aware of the content, and so it just becomes context. Without a context, it becomes meaningless. So when you do certain things which are meaningless over a period of time, you get bored of it, you get sick of it, because you don't understand why should I go through all this rigor. And then it kind of you start getting frustrated, then you lose motivation, you try to avoid them as much as possible. So it's like a chain reaction, okay, one leading to the next. So it's important that we start in the right way so that it helps children, help them understand why and how before we actually do what. So when the child is trying to focus on the mechanical aspect of writing, the child is slow in writing. So a common complaint that we see is, I ask children who come to me with handwriting issues like, what is your problem? Why is your classwork incomplete? The child will, a standard reply would be, the teacher erases the blackboard before I finish. Okay, so that is an example of a child being slow in handwriting. Because what is happening, the other children are able to complete it in a given span of time, and this child is slow, so the teacher is erasing. From the child's perspective, it is always like the teacher is writing very fast and she's erasing very fast. And when we talk about children with special needs, we always assume that it would be good if your child is able to learn handwriting, because then if child is non-verbal, he can communicate, he can write and let us know what he is thinking. Yeah, so that is something which is unique for a child with special needs. But so when I'm talking about handwriting, I'm not focusing on that. I'm looking at the handwriting as a whole. So that would be an important aspect as well. And then it affects motivation levels of the child. And when the child has a good handwriting, it becomes easier for the teachers to correct it. And always your marks and grading is influenced by legibility. If there are two children who are both outstanding, very nice and very studious, and the child who has a better handwriting scores more marks. Okay. So let's write this. You can take a paper and pen. Okay. I would want you to just copy this down. Point number 1, point number 2. I'll just give you a minute here. Please take out a paper and pen. We're talking about handwriting, so it's always good if you have something to write about. I want you to copy what you have written, and probably later if you can just share, it would be fine, but not now. Okay, so the quick brown fox jumped over lazy dogs. Now, when you look at this particular sentence, it's an interesting sentence because you have all the 26 alphabets in the English language here. So I sometimes use this as a way of assessment, because if a child who is like 8-year-old, 10-year-old comes to me and I say write A, write B, and write C, then he looks, what are you looking at? Okay, so I can look and see his the way he looks at me and decide, okay, no, I'm sorry about it. Okay, so then we start getting something like this, because here I'm able to see all the alphabets, how the child is approaching them.
So your voice is cracking.
Okay, the quick brown fox jumped over lazy dogs. Okay, and the is it okay? Is it better now?
Yes, sir.
Hello, is it better now?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, so you please write that sentence and write point number 2. I think with the poll, I found a limitation here. I think it's taking only 40 answers. Okay, so let's see who's the first 40 here. And if you noted down the second word, we'll take this. What was the difference in writing English versus the other language? I hope your poll is active on your phones. You can just write in 2 or 3 words. Point 1 versus point 2. Did not understand the other language, but what was the difference in writing? Attention required was less in English. Yes, very good. The other word was difficult. Yes, bit difficult. Okay, you are familiar with the language, so it's easy. You need less attention. It's difficult to copy and more attention is needed. Yes. See, so this is what happens with children, isn't it? If they don't understand the language, if they don't understand what they're writing, it's like we say in Hindi, na, Kala Akshar Bhais Barabar. Okay, so that is what is happening. First, you understood the sentence. Yes, the time consuming. The other language took more time. Easy to write. Okay, I'm looking at one particular statement which I'm yet to get. I totally agree with whatever has been written here. You're slow to write. It takes more time. It needs more attention. You don't know what you are writing, so you don't really know why I'm writing this. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So thank you very much. So let me go back to the previous slide. What I have asked you to write here is Tamil in Tamil. Okay. So it is it's Tamil in Tamil. Okay, so what has happened here is because you don't know the language, and I think you summed up very clearly. It was difficult, it took more time, it needed more attention. Because you knew English, you were able to write faster, and you understood what you were writing, so it was easier for you. And so in fact, when you start copying a sentence like this from the board, what would you do? You would just look at the quick brown fox and then look at your notebook and write the quick brown fox. And then you look at the board, it's like jumped over lazy dogs. Okay, jumped over lazy dogs. Okay, just 2 times you look at the board and then you're done. Okay, for the entire sentence. But for this one particular word, because you're not aware of it, you will take 10 times, 20 times to look at the board or the screen for in this case, right? So what is essentially happening is when for the item number 2, you are not writing, you are drawing. Okay, so that's what I was trying to explain, that you are not writing, you are actually drawing. You are looking at the image at the alphabet like an image, and you're trying to copy that. So what will happen here is a person who knows how to write Tamil versus a person who does not know how to write Tamil will start from different positions. Okay, let me look at only the focus. There's a standing line. The second alphabet first. Let me put it like an L, and then I put it like an N on top of it, like an intersection, and then one more bigger one there. Okay, so you will segment it. You will write part by part, and so obviously you're going to slow down as well. So that is where the problem lies here. Okay, so the child is not actually writing, the child is drawing. The goal in handwriting instruction is to teach the student to form letters automatically, so that attention can be directed to the content of what is written rather than the mechanical process. You do not want the child to think, where should I start? How should I go? Should I go from left to right or right to left? Okay, so you don't want the child to be thinking on all those things when he's writing. The moment a child is writing A or T or cat, CAT, then the child should have a mental image of a cat. So he is focusing on the content of what he is writing and not on the mechanical process. So that is the goal of handwriting instruction. We have two types of writing. One is called the manuscript or the print writing, and the second one is the cursive. So if I look at the manuscript, it is legible, it resembles blueprint, so it is easier for child to follow. The movements are simple and they're easy to learn, so it's obviously most suited for kindergarten children. It required on documents, okay, where you want clear spaces, and it's preferred for people with poor motor or visual issues, as well as this decrease the reciprocal movements, which means you do not come back later. Okay, like unlike, for example, the difference between a manuscript C and a cursive C. Okay, so in cursive C you go up and then you come back. That is a reciprocal movement. Okay, whereas in cursive you look at the movement is faster. It is continuous and perceived as a whole. So, and it always feels like it's like an adult writing. You feel like you're grown up because you're writing in cursive now. Okay, so it gives you a high as well. But one big advantage the cursive has over print writing is that there are decreased reversals. Okay, so what is a reversal? We talk about B and D. I'm talking about lowercase b and D. B for ball and D for dog. Okay, so B and D reversal is very common in children with handwriting issues. Need not they just by looking at it, it need not be a sign of dyslexia. Just many children have reversal as a typical part of development as well. Okay, now if I look at why do we have a B and D reversal, the main reason here is that the B and D are mirror images. Okay, when I look at a B in a mirror, it looks like D. Okay, so what happens here is that the child who puts a standing line, now he's confused whether the circle for B should be on the left side or on the right side. So if I have a left-right confusion, then I'll have issues with B and D reversal as well. But when you look at a cursive writing, you will find that a cursive B and a cursive D are very different, and they are not mirror images. So the chances of reversal is almost zero in cursive writing. Okay, but children do write reversals in other words. They do not confuse between one alphabet and the other. For example, instead of writing 7 the normal way, it can be a mirror image. Okay, now that is also a reversal, but it is more an issue with orientation, and there's no confusion with another alphabet. Cursive is easier to write, and that's why most of us write in cursive, and it's preferred by all. It keeps you fast. You do not have to take a pencil again and again, so which means you just continue writing faster. Let us look at this. Okay. So what you see here is a tiger. Okay. So I'm looking at the tiger from the side. I'm looking at the tiger from the bottom. I'm sorry. Okay. So let me not pause it. I'm looking at a tiger from the bottom. It's still a tiger. I look at a tiger from the side. I'm looking at it from the top. It is, what do I call it? I call it tiger. I look at it from the right side. I call it tiger. I look at it from the left side. I call it tiger. So whatever side I'm looking at it, it is a tiger at all times. Okay. So I see a tiger as a tiger, irrespective of from where I'm seeing it, in which direction it is, whether I'm seeing only the front part of it or the back part of it or the whole of it. So I understand that is my world. It's a 3D world. Okay, 3 dimension. Okay, 3 dimension, I mean the length, breadth, and the height. So that is my 3D world. So what happens in the world of symbols? Okay, when I look at symbols, the alphabet is a world of symbols. Now in this case, the world of symbols, everything changes, because if I have a piece which is on the right side, it is called B. A standing line and a curve on the bottom of the line on the right side is called B. A standing line and the curve on the left side is called D. So if I change my orientation, or if I go to the other side of the alphabet and see from there, I'll say, no, this is B, this is not D. Okay, so it changes now. And then if I look at the standing line and the curve on the top, it's on the right side is called P. And then if it is on the left side, it's called Q. So this is the world of symbols. It can be so confusing for children because all this time till the age of 3, they have been exposed to the real world. They see this object is always called the same thing irrespective of from where you see that. But now it is changing. Okay. So for that to happen, I need to understand about my body, and this is the prerequisites for writing. Okay, before the child actually gets into handwriting, the child should have all these things: an understanding of the child's body, so body awareness. Okay, so how do you know the child has got body awareness? Is the child able to get under the chair? Okay, so that will be an idea of body awareness. Or if you put a bindi or a sticker on the child's shoulder or on the back, is the child able to pick it up? Okay, that's the idea of body awareness. Bilateral coordination, using your right and left side in a coordinated manner. And then ball catching would be an example for bilateral coordination. Holding a water bottle with one hand and opening a cap can be another example of bilateral coordination. Visual perception, its ability to identify shapes, differentiate forms and shapes. Your eye-hand coordination, by definition, eye-hand coordination is your hand should go where the eyes want them to go. Okay, that is your hand-eye coordination. Postural control or balance, proximal stability in the shoulder and hips. And here we are focusing more on the shoulder and trunk. Hand strength, so your finger strength able to press and hold objects. Object manipulation, finger isolation, you should be able to touch individual fingers with your thumb, like counting your fingers. Okay, so that could be an example of finger isolation. And then planning a movement. How do you plan a movement? How do you let's say you're talking about the same example could be of going under the chair, or it could be catching a ball. Everything requires a motor planning or praxis. Okay? Then you have to be oriented towards the alphabets. You should know what these alphabets are. Many times I see parent once comes to the child center, and then when I check with the child and show him a particular alphabet, the child doesn't even recognize what that alphabet is. So how would you expect a child who is not able to recognize an alphabet to write that alphabet? And I know a child who can perfectly copy a one full page without actually understanding a meaning of a single word. Okay, so I just felt bad for the child because he has spent so much of time learning how to write, but he doesn't know what he's writing. Okay, so orientation to alphabets, the meaning is obviously more important than writing itself. And then eye movements, the ability to hold still. See, when a child is copying from the blackboard onto his notebook, then the head and the eye have to coordinate and they have to work together. Okay, so this eye movement is important there because the eye should move when the head is stabilized. Okay, we can probably discuss about this later. And then attention for a task as well as memory. So pre-writing skills that we're looking at, these are essential skills which are important for a child to hold pencil and write. Let me take you to this one pre-writing skill. This is called a Matnoid song, and this is from the Handwriting Without Tears curriculum. This is to teach body parts and use of body parts. We'll go through this, and then probably you'll have a better view. So you ask the child to form a mat man with the wooden pieces that they have. Yeah. So what you see here is with this particular song, you can teach a lot of things to the child. You understand it's making a man, a man, and then you create. The child is able to understand spatial orientation. The child understands that this has to go on the top. This has to be on the sides. Excuse me.
This sentence is grammatically correct.
Yeah. So you see that the child is able to understand the parts of the body. The child knows numbers because it's like one nose, two eyes, two hands. Then we talk about the function: two hands to clap, two arms to reach, two legs to stand, 2 feet to walk. Okay. So and then so once that before even going into writing, you actually play this song and you make the child do it again and again. And this can be done in the classroom as well, where you start ask give one piece to every child and ask them to come and fit it, and then the child is able to understand where which parts will go. And so even before teaching a pencil or taking a chalk piece, the child learns how to assemble, okay, how to form a image. Now when you make a child do this, following this you will also ask them to draw this madman, or I may draw this on a board, and as I'll sing along, I'll sing the song as I draw it on the board and ask the child to copy it on the notebook. Now, because the song is there and it's multi-sensory, right? So it makes it more interesting for the child, and the child is able to draw. So when you look at asking a child to draw a picture of a man before the Matman song and after the Matman song, you will be pleasantly surprised. The pre-writing skills we are looking at is hand dominance, and then crossing the midline of the body, and functional pencil grasp, recognize similarities and differences in form, and copy basic lines and shapes. So I'm going to focus on a few things here. The hand dominance. So hand dominance, we always have a question: is this child ambidextrous or ambisinistral? Okay, so what is ambidextrous? Ambidextrous means the child is able to use the right hand or left hand equally well, and so we really don't know which hand the child has a dominance. Whereas ambisinistral means this child is having a poor dominance, and so the child's usage of the right hand or the left hand is neither of the hand is good. Okay, it's neither the right hand or not the left hand. Both are having a poor performance. Okay, so if I give you a definition for ambidextrous and versus an ambisinistral, I can tell you ambidextrous hand is the use of either right hand or left hand, which is equivalent to the right hand of a right-handed person. Okay, so let me repeat the same exact definition again. Ambidexterity means I'm able to use the right hand, the either hand, the right or the left, which is equivalent, which is as good as the right hand of a right-handed person. Okay. Whereas what would be the definition for ambisinistral? I use either the right hand or the left hand, which is as good as the left hand of the right-handed person. Okay. So we're looking at comparing the dominant hand of a dominant hand of a given person and then a non-dominant hand. Okay, I hope I'm clear with that. So ambisinistral is using the left hand or the right hand of a person which is equivalent to the left hand of a right-handed person. Okay, so that is ambisinister. So what do we see commonly in children with special needs is that we find that they have multiple issues. It's not just with handwriting. They have issues with body awareness. They have issues with attention, with memory, with motor planning. And so what happens is when you look at the entire thing, ambidexterity is found in very few percentage of the population, less than 5%. Okay, so when that's why I put the last sentence there. When you make a common diagnosis, you're usually right, but when you make a rare diagnosis, you're rarely correct. So always go with the incidence and find out. See, I would suspect ambidexterity only when I rule out everything else. The child is fine, he is talking well, he is intelligent, he is able to do all physical activities, right? So, and when I have all of that, and then I see the child is getting using both hands equally good, then I will look at ambidexterity. But when I see that the child has multiple issues, I'll go with ambisinister. He uses either hand for eating and writing, and more than 4 years of age. Typically, you will find handedness from 18 months to 4 years. So you can wait till 4 years for the child to develop their hand dominance. And then poor midline crossing is seen where the child, if there's a big picture, the child may use left hand on the left side of the color picture for drawing and coloring, and the right hand on the right side for the coloring. So how to identify hand dominance? Okay, always place object in the child's midline and look for the preferred hand. So we cannot basically decide just on one particular thing. Okay, so we'll have to look at multiple options. So that is one is place it on the midline and say out of 10 times when you place on a random, and don't give all the 10 times, I mean, at a stretch. Okay, at different points of time, you will give it on 10 different occasions and see which hand the child prefers most. Roll a ball on the floor towards the child and look for the preferred hand. Which hand does the child prefer to bend and take the object? Okay, a ball which should be good enough to be taken with a single hand. So I would recommend you roll a ball like a table tennis ball, not something like a football, with then you see the child uses both hands. Okay, or note the hand the child prefers to use instruments such as clips, scissors, spoon, etc. That may give you an idea about the dominance. And always check the quality of work, compare both hands. When the child is using either the right hand or the left hand, you will have more than one opportunity to compare the work of the right hand and left hand. So try to compare and see which one has a better quality. Now we have to look at some biomechanics here. When it comes to handwriting, we need to focus a lot on the intrinsic muscles. So we have two groups of muscles: the extrinsic muscles, or the extrinsic muscles of the hand, or we can call it the external muscles, and then the intrinsic muscles, okay, or the internal muscles. So extrinsic muscles are the ones which starts outside the hand, and so we have two things: an origin as an insertion. So the origin is outside the hand and the insertion is within the hand. Okay, so these are the muscles which are the extrinsic muscles, and these are large muscles. Okay, and so when the muscles are large, they are usually meant to do hard work. Hard work means, for example, I'm looking at a drilling or a hammering. Okay, so that would be the purpose of the large extrinsic muscles. So which means they are power muscles, they generate more force, but they get tired very quickly. So that is the extrinsic muscles. When I talk about the intrinsic muscles, so these are muscles which start within the hand and they end within the hand. So I'm talking about the lumbricals and the interossei. Okay, dorsal and the palmar interossei. So these muscles are the intrinsic muscles of the hand. Now, as you could know, the intrinsic muscles are smaller, and so they need less energy. And so when you use them, you can use it for a longer period of time. So when you talk about writing exam for 3 hours together, you have to use your intrinsic muscles. The moment you start using your extrinsic muscles, you will find that the child complains of pain because of fatigue. The child starts complaining. So whenever you see a child who complains of pain while writing, you have to look at whether the child is going and using the extrinsic muscles or the intrinsic muscles. Okay, so one good way of identifying that is look at the wrists. Always look at the wrist position and see how the child is doing. In this example, what you see here is that the child is doing a lot of movement with the wrist flexion. Okay, you see a lot of wrist flexion. The moment you see wrist flexion, you should suspect extrinsic muscle work. The child is moving the wrist. Okay, whereas in handwriting, you do not need wrist. The wrist has to be stabilized. The fingers should be moving. Okay, the intrinsic muscle should be working. But as you could see it here, the child is bending the wrist often, and so this child is using the extrinsic muscles. So why? So what do we need? We need wrist extension. Okay, why do we need wrist extension? Wrist position affects finger mobility. Okay, so if your wrist is an extension, we all of us know that wrist extension is a functional position. You get a better grip only when you have a wrist in extension. Okay, and your finger is able to move better when the wrist is stabilized in extension. A hook grasp increases the use of extrinsic muscles. So what you see on the right side, this one with the cross, this is a hook grasp with a wrist flexion. The moment you see wrist flexion, the child starts using the extrinsic muscles, and that is not ideal for writing. And when you use your wrist extension, then you minimize your lifting your wrist, and it is functional. So how can we make a child who gets into wrist flexion to wrist in extension? One quick tip would be to encourage the child to write on vertical surfaces. Okay, so whenever you see a child writes on a vertical surface, you will find the wrist will go into extension. If it is on a horizontal surface, you see flexion. On a vertical surface, you will find wrist extension. So this is where you will start with for children who are flexing the wrist while writing. You can look at the wrist here. Please ignore the other things. I want you to focus only on the wrist. So you will find when the child is, even when the child is unsupported, he uses wrist extension. It could be a sleeping line or a standing line, doesn't make a difference. The wrist goes into extension. So what are the red flags we see? We see when the child has an awkward pencil grasp. Okay, that would be a time when the therapist has to intervene. Where the child has difficulty controlling a pencil. It's like child is dropping it often, so or the pencil appears to be very loose in the child's hands. The child shows a tendency to use the whole hand to manipulate objects. There is no finger isolation. So one thing which I always check is, can the child count the fingers? So can the child touch the 4 fingers through with the thumb? Okay, so just touch the tip of the fingers. Have poor endurance for pencil-based activity. The child will start complaining of pain. Display messy or slow handwriting, and you will find that there's a lot of eraser, paper tearing, and all those things. Have difficulty staying within the lines when coloring, because when you have to be precise, you have to use your finger muscles. When you try to use your wrist muscles, you become, or the shoulder muscles for that matter, you write bigger. Child applies inappropriate pressure to the pencil paper for pencil-based activities. It's either too dark or too light, or have poor upper limb strength. Child has difficulty coordinating both hands together for two-handed tasks, the right hand as well as left hand. Child has poor eye-hand coordination. The child may be very good orally or verbally skilled, but the child has very difficulty when it comes to writing or coloring. Okay, now if you get into writing, which alphabets will you teach first to write? Will you teach the capitals of the uppercase or the lowercase or the print or the cursor? Please take out your phones, switch tabs. Yeah. Okay, lowercase cursor, lowercase print. That's an interesting graph there. Okay, Yeah, so 88% of you have said it is the uppercase. Yeah, which is right. Why? Why to start uppercase? So when I look at uppercase, so you're right. Uppercase is one we have to start. Why? Okay, so when you look at the uppercase or the capital letters in English, you will find that all the alphabets have a same starting position. Okay, so the alphabets are developmentally more easy to write, and they are all standing lines and sleeping lines. I'm trying to move this somewhere. Yes. Okay, so they all have the same starting position. Whereas, so everything should start from the top, A to Z. All the 26 alphabets must start from the top. Whereas in lowercase, you have 4 different starting positions. Okay, so I'm looking at C. I can say that the letter starts from the top. This letter starts from the middle, and then it goes to the top. So you can look at this C, D, E, and F for examples of 4 different starting positions. So if I'm looking at A is similar to C. Lowercase a is similar to lowercase c. So I'm not going to, so C, so that C is representative of all the alphabets, which starts from the top and goes to the bottom. Okay. D is you start from the middle, you write letter C and then it goes up. Okay. So many of us have the habit of writing D like a standing line first and then you turn to the left and put a circle, which is not recommended. You should start with a C and then go up and write D. Then you look at E. So E again starts from the middle and then it goes up and then comes down. And F starts from the top, but it still further goes up and then comes down. So you have 4 different starting positions. When I look at the size, if I write alphabets uppercase, I can write all the uppercase alphabets in 3 lines. Okay, all A to Z will be in 3 lines. Okay, whereas if I look at lowercase, I have 2 sizes. There are full alphabets like your F and even G, Q, and Y. These are full alphabet. These are long alphabets. And then the other one is a half alphabet, which you can write within 2 lines. The double line notebook, which you can write within that, would be your A, C, E, M, N. So these are your half alphabets. When I look at the position, all capital letters take the same position with respect to the line. Okay, whereas the lowercase, you have 3 different positions. Now, whatever I mean by the position is with respect to the line. If I write lowercase t for train, I start from, if I'm writing on a double line notebook, okay, I start from outside the double line and write T. Or if I look at A or O, I write within the double line. If I look at Y, Q, G, it goes under the or below the double line. So broadly, what we do here is we look at 3 types of position. We call them as tall letters. The tall letters will be a K, L, H, T. Okay, F are all tall letters. Your short letters would be your A, C, E, M, N, O, R, S, U, V, W, Z. Okay, so these are all your short letters. And I look at hanging letters or descending letters. I'm looking at G, Q, Y. So these are examples of your P. The lowercase p is a descending letter. So if we look at the position with respect to line. So there are 3 different types of letters. The tall letters, the short letters, and the descending letters. And capitals are distinctive, it's easy to identify, and there are no mirror images there. Lowercase, you have mirror images, so it's easy to get confused. So if I look at overall variations, all capital letters have 1 into 1 into 1. It's only one variation. I do not have to worry too much about where should I start. All the letters will start at the top. I should not worry about what should be the size. All have same size. I should not worry about what is the position. All are same position. But when it comes to lowercase, I have to remember 4 into 2 into 3 it is 24. So there are 24 possibilities. So if the moment I start writing an alphabet, I should know whether I should start from the top or should I start from the middle. Okay. Or number 2 is I'll have to look at is this a full alphabet or is it a half alphabet? It should start outside the line, it should be within the line, or it should go under the line or below the line. Right? So I have to look at all these 24 things. I have to keep that in mind when I'm writing a lowercase. So which obviously tilts the favor in uppercase. So you'll always teach uppercase alphabets first. And I look at this is purely my own understanding of handwriting proficiency. So what I see is, um, because there are many kids who come to us at a later stage. They come to it at 6 years old, 8 year old, 10 year old, 12 year old, 15 year old. Then we have to be realistic with what our aims and goals are, what can be realistically possible. Then I look at this. Okay, who is going to write uppercase cursive and lowercase cursive, uppercase manuscript and lowercase manuscript? Probably teachers who are going to teach cursive writing needs to know it. People who are calligraphists who or artists, they need to know that. Majority of us will fall in this particular section, the second row, where we write manuscript upper and lowercase case and cursive lowercase only. We do not focus a lot on uppercase cursive by most of the population, which use it for examination, for document writing as well. And now there are some category of children. I mean, some of us, I mean, we are occasional writers, and I'm sure most of us are occasional writers now. We do not do a lot of writing. We do a lot more of typing and other things. So if it is okay, is it okay if I just teach the uppercase for this particular child, because he might just have to, he's not going to write exams, I'm sure about it. And then he can just fill up application forms. He can make a list of groceries. He can copy down an address or a phone number. So that is the occasional writer. So for this child who's already having a lot of other issues, so can I restrict myself to uppercase? And if I feel that the child is able to write uppercase and is confident, is more interested, I can definitely go into lowercase teaching as well. And finally, for some children for whom it's even more difficult, then I go for something like a name only. I can, by those with difficulty in writing, with physical disability or poor intelligence, I look at name only first to start with, or kids who come to me 10 year plus. Okay, I start with name. Let me see if they're able to at least get that in 3 months' time. If they're able to write their name, I may proceed to uppercase. If not, then I'll just move on to something else. And why do we need that? We need it for signature. We can use it as a signature in official documents. Some do's and don'ts with regard to handwriting would be to establish routines. Always make sure that it doesn't come as a surprise. Now what happens is a child is playing with his favorite toy and you ask him to stop it and you ask him to come and do the writing. Now what is happening? From a preferred activity, the child goes with a non-preferred activity. So it's very difficult for the child to take it. But if the child knows it's coming, the child is prepared. Just like we are doing it now in the lockdown. We know the rules, we know what to expect, we know what time the shops are going to be open. So we change or we adapt to the structure, okay, the routine. Now, if it is like one day it is open at 6 o'clock, one day it's they close it at 1 o'clock, one day they close it at, they say it's closed and without any information, okay, then how difficult it would be for us as well. Okay, so it's important that the child has a routine first. There should be a fixed time when the child can know that this is my writing time. Okay, so you have to use visual schedules. I think it's a big topic in itself. Visual schedules are basically a visual timetable which you will use for the child, so that the child knows when it is coming. Okay, and it brings predictability. And I always feel that using visual schedules is the way to autonomy. And many parents when they ask me like when should we stop OT? Okay, when can I stop sensory integration therapy? I say you have to get into visual schedules. Only then I can stop OT. Otherwise, we cannot stop it for some children. Many children, if it is skill deficit, they learn it, or some children may outgrow it. But for many other kids, we need a structure, and that can come only through visual schedules. A distraction-free environment is important for writing because the child is not interested, and on top of that, you have a lot of distractions around. So what is a distraction-free environment? The child has a separate room. If the child does not have a room, the child at least has a corner. Okay, and I understand Mumbai is a place where it's quite crowded and people live in small apartments. So we cannot expect the luxury of a separate room for every kid. Then what I always recommend parents is you have the almirah or the bureau. You can just pull it from the wall, have a distance of 4 or 5 feet, create a cabin space behind the almirah, so that now the child is facing the wall, the child is covered on all the 3 sides, and the child is able to focus on the writing task. And make sure there is adequate lighting as well. And the child has a designated place for writing, so the moment to take the child to that particular place, This is especially for children who are non-verbal or they have limited understanding. Now they understand that why am I here? This is writing time. I'm come here to write. So even if you are not able to express in words, or even if your words or instructions are not helping the child to understand, just by taking them to that particular place will make them understand what they are supposed to do. Repetition is a key for handwriting. It is not enough that the child comes to me and I teach them alphabet. The next day the child comes, the same problem continues. I start from the beginning because handwriting comes with repetition. Good habits such as avoiding cluttered desk is very important because obviously you don't want the child to get distracted by unwanted things. And the writing session should be around 15 minutes. Don't keep it too long. And it has to be more frequent. It can be like that 3 times a day, 5 times a day. And in that sense, what will happen is the child is totally focused during those 15 minutes rather than you take it as a 1 hour session and the child is focused only for the first 15 minutes. And after that, you have to prompt him, you have to scold at him, and you throw these objects, you threaten him, and nothing works. And then the child gets used to it. So keep it short, have a target, focus on what the child can do, modify the task so that the child is successful, and you will find the child is more interested in writing. And you always should focus on quality and not on quantity. What do I mean by that? Is sometimes we see you ask a child to write a particular word 10 times. Okay, like for example, there's a word called horse, HORSE, and you want the child to copy it 10 times. You basically want the child to remember the spelling and how to write, right? And so what you will find is you will the child writes horse correctly for the first 1 or 2 times. The third time when it comes, the child misses out the R, and the fourth time is now a continuation from the third. So the horse becomes a horse for the next 6 or 7 times. So what will the child remember? What is the spelling that the child remember? Why is it happening? Because the child is taking the reference of the what he has written from the previous line. He does not look at what the parent or the teacher has written. His reference becomes the previous line. But why not ask the child to write horse was 1 time? And you want HO and SC, so you can make horse, and you can make a house. So you can write 10 different words, and the child has to write only 1 time each word. We get the repetition that we want. It is of good quality, and we also get the quantity in that case, but not just the same word again and again. Okay, so and focus on one alphabet at a time. So many times what happens is there are also children who go to mainstream schools, and then you will find that you look at their answer sheets. It looks like a battlefield. Okay, a lot of red marks here and there, a lot of bloodshed. And what you don't want the child is you cannot demotivate a child with that. So would you think a child whose paper looks like that would be interested and say like, I'm going to work on all of this. I'm going to make sure that there's no red marks in my paper. That's never going to happen. Or it may happen one in 1,000. Okay, so what we need to do is we have to identify one alphabet at a time. If you find the child has problem with multiple alphabets, choose one alphabet, train on that, focus on that, and if you correct, you will correct only that particular alphabet. You will forget or ignore everything else. I will focus on only one particular alphabet. And when the child looks at his paper, he finds, oh, everything is right, only one is wrong. Okay, so let me just work on it. Okay, so you will. So what will this do is this will make the child interested in writing and make sure that even the single mistake is obliterated. So it is important that you have to focus on one alphabet, and the best way to know whether what you have done is effective or not effective is when the changes reflect in the child's classwork. Okay, because you are always there. The moment you sit next to the child and ask them to write, you see that the child is not writing, you give him an eraser, ask him to do the correct way, and you will find that the child is able to write only when you're next to him. But when you're not around, is the child able to write it correctly? Only when you see that, it means the child has actually taken it internally and is able to write it. Once you see that, move on to the next alphabet. It means the child has learned how to do it, is not going to forget that. And some common mistakes that we do is inconsistent instruction. So what do I mean by that? I was giving the example of writing D. We always teach the child how we write it, isn't it? So do not teach the child how you write an alphabet. Look at some norms, or at least if do not have the norms, at least come to a consensus. You cannot teach one way, the teacher cannot teach the other way. And most of the times we do not have a curriculum for handwriting in India. So every teacher teaches in her own way. Okay, so what you will have to do, focus is come to a consensus and make sure all of us teach in the same way. So if you're writing D, D should always be written with a circle first, the C first, and then the standing line. So that is how you write lowercase d. If I'm looking at M, or if I'm looking at even alphabet capital A, I said all alphabets, uppercase alphabets start from the top. So you should not write A from the bottom. We typically write A, M, and N from the baseline. It should be written from the top. Okay. Hand holding while writing must be avoided. So some children expect that, and it's always very difficult to win. The moment you start holding the child's hand and you start writing, what it does is the child. I've seen it so many times that the moment the mother or the parent holds the child's hand, the child starts looking somewhere else. The child does not even look at the paper. So what happens is the child has given his share of responsibility to the parent. Okay, you take care. It's your work to get me to do this work. I'm not interested. So avoid hand holding, not even a finger touch, not even touching the elbow or the shoulder, nothing. The child should be able to write on his own. Now we have some strategies for that, and it will come. Okay, and it's definitely possible, and there is a way to it. But hand holding is a very bad way of teaching handwriting. Focus should be on reading first and not on writing. So do not start writing before the child is able to identify alphabets. Make sure the child is able to identify at least 50% of the alphabets. Or if 26 English alphabets, at least 13 alphabets if the child is able to identify in random. Okay, what does it mean? The child can obviously say ABC, and with the rhymes he may be able to identify. He should be able to identify an alphabet in random. Okay, if you show him B, he should be able to say this is B, this is S, this is Q. Okay, and so only then you proceed to writing. Till then you focus on pre-writing skills, which are your coloring and dot joining and those kind of things. Your standing line, slipping line, all fine, but do not venture into alphabets without the child being able to identify the alphabet. For kids who come 8 years or 10 years or older than that, then I don't go by this 50% rule. I say, if you are able to identify one particular alphabet, we start focusing on that particular alphabet. Okay. And then starting with cursive, I also saw some of you voted for cursive. Cursive is, I think the basic logic behind choosing cursive is to avoid reversals. That is how I can see it. But it's very difficult for children to learn cursive when the fingers are not ready to write. So do not start with cursive. We are going to make children more and more aversive to writing. So developmentally, uppercase is more appropriate to start because it's easy, and we discuss all about that. Avoid using sketch pen and whiteboard markers because you do not have to give enough pressure while you're writing. And once you start with all these things and then you get into pencil, the child is not able to give adequate pressure. So you can use crayons, you can use chalk piece. In the older houses, you can talk about where you have a cement floor. Then you can even use a coal. You can use a brick, a broken piece of a brick, or you have those big chalk pieces. You can use that as well. Okay, so you can use all that and make the child write or scribble on the floor. Okay, so all these are good for handwriting, but sketch pen and whiteboard markers are not good. Changing hand of the child. If you're not sure of the dominance, please wait for some more time. Give more of sensory integration therapy, more of OT, and give a lot of bilateral activities so that the child develops hand dominance. Dominance is an outcome of communication between your two hemispheres. So that has to happen. So a lot of bilateral activity will help the child to establish dominance, and then you can use it. And sometimes out of culture, we decide that a child who is left-handed, he should be writing in the right hand. So that should be avoided. And finally, yeah, there's one more point which I've not mentioned here, which has occurred to me just now, is that I'm not a fan of 4-line notebooks. Because I feel it is too demanding on a child, because the child is just learning how to write an alphabet, and then you tell him that you have to start from the top line, you have to go to the middle line. So I always start from on a white paper or an unruled paper, and help the child to form the alphabets. The child should know where to start with respect to the alphabet, not with respect to the line. Okay, so please avoid that. And by the time the child learns how to write within 4 lines, that is in the lower kindergarten. Okay, and then by the end of it, when the child has just learned it, you change it and then you introduce a double line notebook. So it's very unfair on the child as well. So I always start with unruled and then I go for a double line notebook, because with double line you can teach the tall letters, short letters, and descending letters well, with for a lowercase handwriting. And finally, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. You cannot have too much of writing. Many times I see that the child comes home from school, his classwork is incomplete, so mother makes him write for 1 or 2 hours, complete the classwork, and then the homework. There's no play at all. And we discuss about the prerequisites. So it's important that the child has all the prerequisites which are important for, which will help in writing. Without working on the prerequisites, you cannot expect outcome in handwriting. The alternative to handwriting can be keyboarding for children with cerebral palsy or poor hand function, or children with poor cognition, or older kids who are too late to start with. Then we can get into keyboarding and typing, teach them how to take a printout. And as I mentioned in the levels of handwriting proficiency, that we focus only on the signature. So you take a printout, put your signature, it is your document. And just to add on, I have a webinar series coming up on handwriting made easy, which is the third batch. 2 batches already over, coming from May 25 to 28. It's for 6 hours overall, but it actually goes more beyond that, because there's a WhatsApp group and there's a discussion happening, assignments and all those things. So timings would be from 2 to 3:30 p.m. and the special fee is 1,500, and we use it on Google Meet. If any of you are interested, you can do that. It will be a much more in-depth understanding of how to teach, what to teach, when to teach, and everything around it. So I'm ready to take questions. Can I?
So should we read out the questions which are there, or you want the people to say it?
Yeah, first we'll address the questions which are already there, and then people can ask questions.
Arya, can you start?
Yes. Good afternoon, sir. So I'll be starting with the questions.
Yes.
Yeah. So first question is, can reading and remember before writing using working memory?
Can reading and remembering before writing using
working memory?
I'm not getting the question. Are you asking like can it help improve working memory? If that is your question, and I say yes.
Okay. So I don't know, the questions are written like that. So did not understanding the language by child and the stroke patterns differ from, so 1 minute. Okay, so I'll start with this. So kids having issue with writing letters like X or K have issues with midline crossing. So working on their overall midline activities would help, or something more specific strategies need to be worked upon?
See, I really don't see that as an issue with midline crossing, because I mean, even children without midline crossing have issues with X and K, and so we can. There are some specific strategies that you can look at depending on the child's level of understanding. Sometimes I give numbers. For example, if I look at X, let me just share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so just give me a minute. I'm sharing a screen.
I think the ones who are sending the questions right now can raise their hands instead, and you all can ask directly.
Yeah, if you can see my screen, I've given you an example of A. Okay, so what I also do is I give numbers. So I find it very helpful for children for a lot of reasons, because we typically, you see in a worksheet or a handwriting book, you always have arrows to point out which direction the alphabet should go. I always start this way. I put a star where the alphabet should start, and then I write numbers. Okay, so which means understanding numbers is a prerequisite for this particular strategy. And many times you find that if the child is able to identify 1 to 9, even if he's not able to write, if you can just identify the numbers 1 to 9, it's good enough. And now what I do is I look at this. You see where the numbers are 1, then 2, and then 3 is next to 1, 4 goes to the bottom, and 5 and 6. So numbers here essentially are giving directions. Okay, it is telling the child where should I go. So initially I would start like this, asking the child to just point out to the numbers. I'll say, where is 1, show me 1, show me 2, show me 3. And once the child is able to do that, then I would say, can you drag it from 1? The child has to take it finger tracing. If you look in the bottom, I mentioned it as finger tracing. The child has to take it from 1 to 2, 3 to 4, and then 5 to 6. Now the child is doing it 10 times here. So you have the smileys here. Okay, so here what you do is once the child has done it one time, you strike out a smiley. Okay, and then you ask the child to do it second time. So now there's also counting. The child knows that how many smileys are left, how many times he's supposed to do it. So this is a level 1. Okay, and then what do? I go to level 2. Level 2 is without the numbers. Now the child, because he's done it 10 times already, should be able to do it. If not, I may continue the level 1 for 10 more times. And so gradually I move on from this to the next level, which is without numbers. And then I go for pencil tracing. If you see level 2 and level 3 differences, finger tracing versus pencil tracing. Okay, and then you go into dot joining. So I go into these kind of steps, step by step for every alphabet, and I find this works well with X and K as well. Very specific, and one good thing is you can use this for any language. You can use the number concept, the number method. It's called kinesthetic method. Not exactly the numbers. Numbers something which I found out to be effective, but it's based on the kinesthetic method of handwriting, in which you do repeat it so many times so that it becomes automatic. We talk about motor memory. Okay, motor memory is better than verbal memory. That's what this focuses on, and you will find that you can use this strategy for X and K as well.
Yeah. So thank you, sir. So the next question is, till what age writing reversal of words or number is considered normal in otherwise seemingly normal child?
Yeah, you can wait till the child is 6 years old. Grade 1 is a good time to look at. So grade 1 till grade 1 is okay. Grade 2, you should not see reversal.
Okay. So, sir, if a child's handwriting is very light, what activities need to be done so that it's legible?
Yeah. So for first thing, I would always look at is the shoulder stability, and child is able to give enough pressure in other activities, not only related to handwriting, in other activities as well. And if that is so, then I'll work more on shoulder stability and shoulder working. One example or one particular feedback that will help a child with writing with greater pressure, I encourage using carbon papers. You take a carbon paper and put it like 4 or 5 pages below the where the child is writing, and then for every stroke the child is making, you can turn the page and see if there is an impression on the 6th page. And you can always model that. You can also write it on the paper and say, when I'm writing, I am able to see it on the 6th page. You are writing, you're not able to see because you're writing lighter. So I think that will be a very good feedback for the child to understand how much pressure he has to use.
Okay. Then the next question says, does skipping, crawling milestone have an effect on handwriting?
Not specifically. Basically, we need to have we need to understand about our body, and that body awareness will come only through using the body in variety of ways. You must be able to skip and crawl. You must be able to somersault. You must be able to hang on to something. So all kinds of varieties of movements are good. Okay, so just skipping and crawling alone, I don't think so. I don't know skipping, so I don't have any issues with my handwriting as well.
Okay. So one person has asked, can you throw some light on different types of pre-writing strokes, and by what age should they be encouraged?
Pre-writing, you will encourage pre-writing at 2 levels, basically, before you get into capitals and before you get into cursive. Okay, so the pre-writing for your, all of us know about the standing line and sleeping lines, or those are the pre-writing strokes for your capitals. And then for cursive, you have to get into a lot of loops. Okay, so the loops should be smaller loops and taller loops. So those will help in, for example, for alphabet L for Y. Okay, so you need those loops there. So you will do it before cursive. So around 3 to 4 would be for your rewriting for uppercase, and then cursive should be around when the child is in grade 3. So that would be a good time to encourage cursive writing and go for pre-writing for cursive.
So now, if there is a child who puts too much pressure while writing, how can that be managed?
Yes. Now we have to look at two things again. So as I was telling you, like there are two facets of everything. Is it generic or is it specific? When I'm looking at generic, then this child may have some proprioceptive issue, may not understand how much pressure has to be applied. So that has to be taught in other ways, like through SI therapy and OT. And when you look at specific to handwriting, then one thing which I found effective is to ask the child to hold the pencil a bit higher. The typical holding should be 2 to 3 centimeters from the pencil tip, the pencil lead. You hold it 2 to 3 centimeters from the lead, but for a child who is giving more pressure, I may use 3 to 4 centimeters. Just a slightly back from the lead will reduce the pressure. And for a child to understand that this is where I'm supposed to hold, I can use a micropore tape on the pencil, not with the child's finger, on the pencil, just to give him a visual and tactile feedback, or I may use a rubber band so that the child understands where he's supposed to hold this.
Okay. What is the importance of non-dominant extremity in handwriting?
A non-dominant extremity does two things. One is it's a sign of bilateral coordination, because if I'm not using the non-dominant hand, that will make me suspect the child has a good bilateral coordination. And the next thing would be I would look at stabilizing the paper. If I'm writing on something which is very unstable, then it will have an impact on my handwriting. The non-dominant hand should always be stabilizing the paper. And when you put the non-dominant hand in front, it gives you a much better sitting posture, and you're more upright, and you will be able to write better. So that will reduce the load on your shoulders, and that will make your fingers work easier. So that will reduce the pain on your fingers as well.
Okay. So should we try to change the grasp in a 7 to 8-year-old child, or should we focus on other ways?
If the child is able to write all the alphabets, then I would not change it. If the child has complaint of pain, then I may change it. It's difficult to change for 7 to 8 years unless they are motivated. So we should also look at the child's level of understanding, their motivation levels before actually changing. So I would see till the child is 6 years old, I'll try to change the grasp and work on it. But more than that, it has to be like on a case-to-case basis. So 90% of the times, do not change.
Okay. So when can one start under the table writing?
I don't understand the question. So what is under the table writing?
So under the table writing is child goes under the table. We stick a page, blank page, under the side under the table.
Okay. I mean, you mean the bottom side of the table?
Yeah.
Okay, which is like a roof for the child.
Yes, so that his wrist extension is better and focused and more proximal shoulder stability.
I find that is very cumbersome. I mean, from what you say, I've not experienced this yet, but I feel that just making the child write on vertical surface is good enough. If you don't have a blackboard, you can use some chart paper, or you can have notice board and ask the child to write on that. I would not recommend, because this could be too demanding on the child. It may be fun to do it once or twice, but not on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. So, sir, what home exercises would you suggest to improve handwriting?
Yeah, so good question, because you would want the child to start using the finger muscles, the intrinsic muscles, right? That is what we want to focus on. So the activity should be focused on that. So a good example for such an activity would be using clips or the clothespins. You will use clips to, and typically when you see, is you fix a clip on the, let's say on an iron grill or the window grill, and you ask the child to pull it, okay, pick it up. Most of the time, the child will pull it without using the finger muscles. The child will be pulling it using the shoulders, okay, or elbows. You want them to use the finger muscles. So whenever I give activity using those clips, I do not ask them to pull the clip. I use the clip as something to pick up and drop. So which means I have building blocks. I just invert the building blocks, keep it upside down, ulta, and the child has to collect the building blocks using the clip and drop into a container. Now in this example, you will find the lumbricals work well. Okay, so activities like clips, forceps, tweezers, all these things are good for finger muscles.
Okay. So what if the child doesn't understand the boundaries while coloring and he prefers colors over boundaries?
It could be two things. I mean, if your question is very clear, the child does not understand. So how will you make the child understand? The first thing is I would always try to ask the child to color within a bangle. Okay, so you keep a bangle and ask the child to color within the bangle, so that now the child has a physical boundary, he cannot go beyond it. Okay, and once the child starts coloring within it and he gets appreciation, see, basically children work on appreciation. You have to give them the right kind of challenge, make sure they are successful, that will motivate them. You give them a challenge, they are failed, it's frustrating for them, or there's failure in that, they are demotivated. So when you introduce something, introduce with in a way, because now the bangle is a foolproof way of making sure the child cannot cross the boundary. So once you do that and the child is able to color it, and then he's able to see the nice circle that is able to color within, and that would motivate the child. And do this for some time till the child understands that he has to stay within that. And then what I do is, once I do finish with this, I go for a thick boundary, a circle with a thicker boundary. When you look at MS Word or your PowerPoint, you can always you choose a shape like a circle, and it gives you a weightage. Okay, the circle has a weightage of 0.5, 0.75. You can put the weightage as almost like 20, 25. So that will make the boundary thick, very thick. I try that sometimes. For some other kids who cannot get into that, I go with something else. I use a black chart paper. I make a white circle with a paper, stick it on the black chart paper. Now, if the child is going outside the boundary, the child is not able to see his own color. Okay, that also makes him restrict his movement within the circle. We can try these things.
Okay, that's really interesting. Sir, so many of them, I'll just combine the question. So they have asked that if the child is not able to follow the method you said, like numbers, to write A as we use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yes, what other methods can be used if they don't understand or who are not cognitively that great?
Okay, now when a child is not able to identify numbers, is the child able to identify that alphabet? That's my next question. If not, then please don't do it.
Okay.
You have to tell me, does the child identify alphabet?
They have written if the child cannot read the numbers, to
can
what
you ask
can be
them to
done?
unmute and talk? The person has asked this question.
Okay, so this is Persis Shah. Are you online? Hello?
Can you unmute and ask this question? Because what I want to know is, if a child is not able to identify the alphabet, please do not go into writing. If the child is not able to identify numbers, so are you asking me the particular child in mind?
No, sir, I don't have any particular child in mind, but it is just like if they are able to identify it, but they are not able to identify the numbers, then
Okay.
what if, so maybe from top to down, like how would we go about teaching them how to write it?
Yes. Again, as I was telling you, we have to make it easy for them. So this is a hypothetical child who is able to identify alphabets but not able to identify numbers. It doesn't happen most of the times. Okay, most 90% of the time the child knows numbers and then it gets into alphabets. But let's assume this child does not understand numbers. Then I would you take a cardboard and you have to create a slit, okay, like a window on the cardboard with those alphabets, like L or C, okay, and so it's are you able to get it? You create a slit there, and the child has to put his finger inside, and then the child has to trace it. Initially, you'll ask the child to trace it 10 times. You can also use sandpaper or something on a board and ask the child to trace it on the particular alphabet. And then when you get into pencil, because there's a slit, it will not allow the child to move outside the slit. So you can ask them to do pencil tracing on that, and you can remove it and show to the child like how the alphabet looks like. And now the repetition has to increase. The child has to do 10 times, 20 times to be able to form that motor memory. Is it clear?
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So, sir, some kids are left dominant, but they are made to use their right hand and their grip, and their writing with the right becomes poor and difficult to understand. So, what can be done?
It depends on the age of the child. If it is less than 6, we can change. More than 6, we cannot change. We'll have to look at how else we can work on.
Okay.
Because it also reflects on the motivation levels.
Yes. So there are a few more questions. Can we continue?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So there are few kids who write all the lowercase alphabets of the same size. Is it okay or should be corrected?
It has to be corrected. That's why we need a double line notebook. The double line notebook, you will be able to correct it. I can show you a small sample. Let me share my screen again. Give me a minute.
Yes, sir.
You able to see my screen? So you see, this is what I was talking about. The tall letters, the short letters, and the descending letters. Okay, so your B, D, F, H, K, L, and T would be your tall letters. Your short letters would be A, C, E, I, N, and descending letters will be ones which go down. So for this to understand, the child needs a double line notebook. So if all the alphabets are the same letter, you have to introduce this. And there's other strategies also to teach double line.
Okay.
How to use it. Yeah, next please. Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir. Okay. So some children have issues with spacing the alphabets in the word. Any strategies to work with that?
Yeah, spacing the alphabets. Now this is an obvious issue with print writing. You will not have this issue with the cursive writing, because in cursive, all the alphabets are joined within a word, so there's no issue with spacing. So you, to start with, I would always make them write in worksheets, not on papers or not on notebooks. It will be on worksheets, and you will create boxes so that they have to write the entire word within this particular box, and there will be enough gap between one box and another box to help them understand. For some children, I ask them to read with space, because the space between the alphabets in a word and the space between one word and another word is almost the same. So then I tell them that when you read a sentence, for example, I'm reading this chat box. Let's take a smaller sentence. So if I just look at this, your question itself, some children have issues with spacing. So I ask the child to read it like this. Some children have space, issue space. So I ask them to read with the space in between, so that it becomes clear to them that the space is something that they're not saying yet till now, but it is there. And it becomes them more aware of that available space, and that will reflect on their handwriting. Is that clear? There is one more strategy which use finger spacing, but I don't do that.
Okay, sir. So the next question says, a child 3-year-old doing everything with right hand but writing with left hand. So what hand should be facilitated for handwriting?
He's already writing with the left hand. Look at the control and look at the quality. If you're convinced, the child can continue with left hand.
Okay.
On and off, we get these kind of interesting children. So I think you cannot just go with a general rule. You have to find out what works best for a particular child.
Okay, so if the child has immature grasp of holding pen, so how we can help him to move towards mature grasp? You mentioned about wrist extension while writing.
Yes. The handwriting without tears, they teach you a very simple and effective way of getting a good grasp. What they ask you to do is, when you give a crayon to the child, you just break it and give. Okay? The crayon size which the child is holding, the crayon or the chalk piece, should not be more than 2 inches. If it is less than 2 inches, the child will automatically get into a good grasp. Because it is longer, like a pen, you will find the child starts holding like a twisted grip, which is not required. Okay, so you can just reduce the size of the length of the writing instrument, you will find the grip improves.
Okay. So this is a similar question. How to manage if the child is not writing in the same size or within the line?
Yes, so that is that. I think we have addressed it.
Yes, sir. So, sir, what needs to be done if the child has the ability to write with a minimum tactile feedback, but is unable to write if the feedback is not given?
On the one which I showed you with the numbers, the kinesthetic method, that is the solution. And in this, there's also a concept of teaching orders. You do not teach handwriting from A to Z, okay? Because A is actually a very difficult letter to learn in the first place. So we always start with teaching alphabets which are easier to write. So that means your capital L, all your standing line and sleeping line alphabets like L, T, E, F, H, I. So these are all alphabets which are based only on the standing line and sleeping line. So we will start with that first, because you want the child to get that confidence that I can do it. So you start with a lesser demanding activity. And once the child has that confidence, it doesn't require a touch. So you'll be able to then move on to more complex alphabets later.
Okay. Sir, so there is a participant who's raised the hand. Can we have the question?
Yes.
Sally, can you ask your question, please?
Sally, are you there?
I think she is not. Is there anybody else who has any questions? Please raise their hand before we continue.
There's one last question. So there are some texts say that wrist movement helps fast handwriting and dynamic tripod grasp helps in this the most. What is your view about this?
The dynamic tripod is definitely the most recommended grasp, so no doubt on that. Wrist movement is dependent. What do you mean by the wrist movement? Because if you're looking at flexion of wrist, then I would not recommend that, because you will want to use the intrinsic muscles. But when you're writing, your hands basically have to slide down the page from the left to the right. You just has to move. So there is some amount of your radial deviation and ulnar deviation happening when you're writing. Okay, so it depends on what movement you're talking about. So I would say this flexion is not recommended, but the ulnar deviation is all fine. And dynamic tripod, yes, it improves your speed of writing.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I think we come to the end of it. Gagan, do you have any other questions? You've raised your hand, or this was it?
And this was it. Just and it was sir, radial and ulnar deviation itself I was talking about.
Yes, yeah, that is helpful, because you have to slide it down the paper.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Welcome.
Okay, so we come to the end of the session. Thank you so much, sir, for giving your time to all of us. And the ones who want to register for his workshop, the handwriting workshop, please get in touch with him. It is starting, I think, from Monday, if I'm not wrong.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Ma'am is a little busy in the other webinar, but she's conveying her all her thanks to you, and she will talk to you in some time, she said.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your patient listening, and I like the questions as well. It always makes you feel that you have done something, because once you have questions, it means you understood some things and it has made you think. I'm very happy about it. So thank you for joining, and thank you for inviting me as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.